Joining me right now is Stevens Incorporated Executive Vice President. She is the Senior Policy Advisor there, Mary Kissel. She is also the former Senior Advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mary, great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here. As Vladimir Putin has escalated this conflict, your reaction?
Well, as you say, Maria, the timing is absolutely extraordinary. If there's one lesson that we've learned from Vladimir Putin's vicious attacks on Ukraine, it's that you cannot appease dictators. It does not induce them to behave better. It induces them to press forward. And the idea that we would re-enter a deal which, even when it was inked, Maria, the Iranians were violating it, at a time, too, when they have upped their attacks via proxy groups on places like Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia. They back terror groups in Lebanon, Hamas. The idea that we would do something that was not sanctioned by the U.S. Congress, that was brokered by Russia, and that appeases yet another dictatorial regime, in fact, the world's largest state sponsor of terror, is a terrible decision. And I think that it may lead to what I've talked to you and your viewers about before, which is these kind of cascading crises that this administration will have to deal with of their own making.
It's just extraordinary, Mary, as we watch our adversaries get together and try to push a new world order. China and Russia working together. You say that's dangerous for the free world. Also, the fact that the United States is buying oil still, at this moment in time, buying oil from Russia.
Yeah, in the Trump administration, we unleashed U.S. energy, and that took away a lot of the money that Vladimir Putin had for his campaigns in Ukraine, and the proxy groups that the Wagner group that is affiliated with him was funding in places like Mali, Syria, Libya, and elsewhere. We also put a lot of pressure on the Islamic Republic of Iran, punishing them for their terror activity, for their violation of UN Security Council resolutions with their ballistic missile tests and other things. And it worked. Did it take down those regimes? No, it didn't, but it prevented them from fomenting terror in large swaths of the world. Now we're reading that this administration may lift sanctions on people who committed terror attacks in places like Argentina, who were responsible for killing hundreds of Americans in Iraq. And Maria, I just don't think the American public is paying a lot of attention to this because, of course, our eyes are focused on the horrors in Ukraine. But, these rogue actors are pushing out almost in every corner of the world. And the only way you're going to stop it is through American strength and American leadership. And you just had Garry Kasparov on your show talking about how the Europeans wanted more sanctions than the United States on men like Vladimir Putin. That's not a good sign. And I think that the U.S. Congress needs to wake up and take a much closer look at what's going on across the negotiating table in Vienna.
Yeah, we do not understand what is behind the decisions right now in terms of responding to Putin. Garry Kasparov also just said a moment ago that don't call Vladimir Putin the president of Russia. It's an insult to the Russian people. He is a Russian dictator. Mary, the fact that he is taunting the world with this shelling around the nuclear site in Ukraine, do you think he's losing his mind? I mean, do you think he's going to be taken out? Where is this going? He's obviously a pariah now in the world.
Well, I think the shelling of the nuclear plant shows you the unexpected turns that happen in war and just how reckless Vladimir Putin can be. I mean, remember, Maria, this is a man who deployed chemical weapons, not just in Syria, which was a horror, but on the shores of Britain. He's somebody who has wantonly killed civilians, downing a Malaysian airliner, the prior invasions of Ukraine. It's absolutely possible that he would take a reckless action. But by doing so, he's effectively deterred us because the president said, well, we're not going to send in NATO troops into Ukraine. Why? Because we were afraid that that would, quote unquote, provoke Putin. We delayed a ballistic missile test, a routine test. Why? Because we thought it would provoke Vladimir Putin. And what have we learned? It's just induced him to more and more violence. And just going back to where we started with the Iran nuclear deal, the idea that we would appease these terrorists in the hope that they would behave better, that's just not going to work. History does not bear that out. It's going to create more volatility in the Gulf, in a key energy market. It could create second and third order effects that, upset growth, that complicate the inflation problem, that take many, many, many thousands of lives, most importantly, and that could draw U.S. troops back into a part of the world that we just really don't want to be in. So, again, just back to this idea of, cascading crises, that possibility is there. It can be stopped with some U.S. resolve and some U.S. leadership, and with a change of course in Washington that I hope we'll see soon.
Well, you would think that the negotiators get that, since as the U.S. is negotiating, well, Russia is negotiating on behalf of the U.S., the Ayatollah is still chanting death to America. Dagan McDowell, it's all extraordinary. Mary, stay with us. I'm bringing Dagan McDowell in right now. Go ahead, Dagan.
Mary, in terms of the oil, and that was why oil kind of fell off its highs yesterday, is because the anticipation of Iranian oil coming onto the market. But I don't understand why the administration and Jen Psaki yesterday specifically will not say we're going to ban Russian imports of oil and refined product. Nancy Pelosi said yesterday, ban the oil. And in fact, U.S. refiners, based on reports, have stopped entering into new purchases of Russian oil. So it's already being cut off, in fact. But I suspect that the Biden administration doesn't want, they're worried about, to use an Obama word, optics, that it's about the public relations of it all, that they don't want to stand up and in part take ownership of the skyrocketing gas prices that we've seen. They're more worried about their poll numbers than the devastation in Ukraine or the economic devastation here at home.
I think that's right, Dagan. But of course, the tragedy of this is that by not completely shutting off Russian supplies, you're giving Vladimir Putin the money that he needs to prosecute this war and all of the terrible human rights violations that he's committing. But we're not doing that for the same reason that the Europeans didn't want to fully cut off the Russian banks. It's because, they have European branches and they have ties back to Russia that they don't want to interfere with. It's politically very treacherous for them. Look, the costs to U.S. consumers are already punitive. Those costs will only increase if the United States does not decide to use the energy supplies that are sitting right under our feet. That would be very painful politically. But I think the pressure will build, particularly as the oil price moves up, 110, 120, 150. How high can it go? It also puts the Fed in a very difficult position because they're going to have to do something to tamp down this inflation. But Maria, I know this is a debate you've been having on your show about how far they can go, given where growth is going to go under this administration. They've put themselves between a rock and a hard place.
You would expect that this spike in oil does take out some growth and hit, people's disposable income. Mary, real quick before you go, you are the foreign policy advisor at Stevens. What are you telling investors? What's the one nugget you want to leave our business audience with in the face of all of this?
Yeah, I think it's don't discount the second and the third order effects on European growth. And I see absolutely no lever where these energy prices and the commodity complex goes down. I think it's only going one direction. It's going up.
All right, Mary, great to have you this morning. Thanks so much. Mary Kissel joining us this morning. We'll be right back. Stay with us.